Hello, my name is Carol May Whittick and welcome to Her Conversations, Tools for the Awakening Woman. Her is an acronym for Higher Energetic Resonance. It's the optimal state to embody in order to attract our highest desires. And who is the awakening woman? She's a woman who's seeking greater possibility in her reality and looking for solutions. She knows being awakened is not a lofty ideal, but a necessity. If she can transform herself, she can change the world. Her Conversations will introduce you to talented women who will speak to your spirituality, sensuality, and soul. They share their stories and explain how they are in service to the world. So let their words and these conversations embolden and inspire you. This week's guest on Her Conversations is Sharon Curry, breast cancer coach and mental health practitioner. Her story is fascinating and inspiring. Sharon had a successful corporate career when she was diagnosed with breast cancer, and it was during her recovery that she not only discovered herself, but also came to understand how her beliefs and her emotions had caused her breast cancer. Sharon talks openly about how cancer woke her up to herself and gave her a new life purpose. She also explains what mental health is and how different diseases are indications of particular thought patterns and beliefs. And of course, so much more. And as I always do, I ask my guests the opening question. Her is an acronym for Higher Energetic Resonance. When do you feel at your most her?
For me, do you know what? It's really simple. I know that my energy, my vibration increases when I walk along the sea.
Mm-hmm.
Anybody who actually is following me on Instagram will notice that I take a lot of photographs of the sea, and it's just because it has that effect on me. When I it's actually my daily ritual as well. I know that's something you were going to ask me a bit later, but if I've had a good day or if I've had a bad day, the thing that I really love doing is just going for a walk along the sea. I moved down to the coast 5 months ago. I took my own kind of guidance that I give my clients, which is do what's in your heart, do what makes you happy. And I thought, well, what makes me happy is being by the sea. And it does. I just know whatever's happened in the day, if I go for a walk by the sea, by the time I get home, I just feel so much better.
Perfect. And now let's just find out a little bit more about you in terms of your personal story. How did you get to do what you're doing today?
Okay, well, I was actually in the corporate world for quite a long time. I don't like to admit how long actually, but it was probably 25 to 30 years I was in the corporate world. I know it's quite scary, isn't it? And probably, if I'm honest, at some level I knew that I wasn't really that happy doing what I was doing, but probably, and I'm sure other people can relate to this, you get into a job and it's a very well paid job. I had the company car, the perks, etc. And I just got stuck in the job, and I felt it was kind of what I was supposed to do.
Mm-hmm.
And then I was given the diagnosis of breast cancer in 2010, which did come as a complete shock, I must admit. I always thought, because of the type of person that I was, if I was going to get ill, I'd have a heart attack, because I'm a typical type A person and heart attacks run in my family. So to get breast cancer just completely came and hit me sideways. And I've never had children, so I've never had time off work. So it was the first time really that I'd sat on a sofa going through my radiotherapy, my treatment. And I started to it was probably actually the first time, ironically, even though I was going through treatment, that I'd had a chance to relax and to really kind of start to reflect on my life. And I started to realize that I didn't want to go back to what I'd been doing because it didn't make me happy.
Mm-hmm.
Also, and I'm sure a lot of people, anyone who listens to this who's had any form of cancer diagnosis or serious illness diagnosis, it really is a big wake-up call. And it made me realize that I probably didn't really know who I was. And I knew at some level that I wasn't doing what I was supposed to be doing. I kind of knew that I had certain things that when I did them, they made me feel good, probably your higher energetic vibration. But I'd always sort of put that to one side. And I went on quite a journey. I say to people that I faffed around for 7 years, not really knowing really what I wanted to do. I kind of knew that I enjoyed coaching, because in my job in the pharmaceutical industry, I had a team of sales representatives, and the bit of the job that I did always enjoy was coaching people. So I thought, okay, I'll be a coach. Okay, but the thing was, I then had the little me, the one that said you need to do that's safe. And I started off doing business coaching, but it just wasn't me. And then in 2014, and it was also around the time my dad died as well, so it was quite an emotional time for me. And I stumbled upon Meta Health during an EFT course down in Brighton, and it was just a revelation about, we all talk about the mind-body connection, but it's kind of said very sort of globally, and no one ever really thinks about it. But what Meta Health actually does is it explains, literally from a scientific basis, the connection between the mind and the body. And for me, it opened up a can of worms, because I suddenly realized quite a lot of the beliefs that I'd been holding, that it kind of explained why I'd done certain things that I had, why my life looked the way it did. And so from there, I've really realized that that's kind of where I want to go, is I want to help women who've been through breast cancer, who perhaps are like myself, didn't really know who they were. They're quite driven, but were driving in the wrong direction, to know what their purpose is, who they really are, actually, what's underneath. Because what happens is we end up with this whole layer of beliefs that kind of we come out lovely and pure as a baby, and then we get surrounded by all these beliefs, which means that we can't see out anymore as to who we really are. We've kind of got this big curtain in the way of who we really are, so we end up sort of stumbling around a bit. So what I think is great is it helps you to uncover who you are, and then from that position decide where you want to go. And it's quite scary, but it's also quite exciting as well. And it does make, I just actually, me saying that, I can feel my energy going up. So obviously I'm saying I'm doing what's right because it feels right.
And I know you touched on it a little bit, but just for someone, again, who's listening, who's never heard of Meta Health at all,
Okay.
how would you explain that to them?
Okay, well, there is a Meta Health website. So if anyone was to put in Meta Health on a website, they will find out quite a lot of information. But it basically came about due to a tragic event in the 1980s. A doctor's son died, a Dr. Hamer, who was a German doctor of internal medicine. And then shortly after that, within about a year, his wife died of, he thinks, grief, and he developed cancer. And he just thought, do you know what, I want to evaluate this and try and understand if there's a relationship between an event, I'd say a traumatic event, but as I'll say in a minute, it doesn't have to be a traumatic event, because we all perceive events in different ways, whether events can result in illness. So he did a lot of analysis of patients' records, and he began to realize that actually there was a relationship between our emotions and illness. So effectively, what Meta Health does, if someone came to see me or any Meta Health practitioner, they would sit down with the person, they would talk through the timeline leading up to their illness, and based on what we know from Meta Health, there is a theme behind each illness. So for instance, for breast cancer, particularly ductal carcinoma, which is the breast cancer I had, there is also lobular cancer where the theme is slightly different. If someone develops breast cancer, ductal carcinoma, then the theme is separation, a fear of separation and abandonment. Now that is a very top line theme, so it's then the skill of the Meta Health practitioner to sort of pick away at that, to reveal for each person what that means for them. That's the top line theme. And really what it does is it helps a person to identify the emotional trigger that is resulting in their body adapting, and the resulting adaptation is what in Western medicine we call illness. Interestingly, if you look at all Eastern medicine, they've known about this for thousands of years. They've always known that emotions, which as we know is emotions, it's energy in motion. They've always known that it's emotions that affect the body. If you went to go and see a doctor in China, up until very recently, you only got paid by that doctor if you remained well. because we know about acupuncture, etc. We know that when somebody's body is disturbed, their energetic body, so you talk about your higher energetic resonance, what disturbs that is unsupported beliefs. I'll come back to that in a second about how that relates to emotions, okay? But if you have a belief that's unsupportive, well, actually I'll say it now because it links. If you have an unsupported belief, and you may not even be aware of it, you're probably having repetitive thoughts related to that belief. And those thoughts result in emotion. Now, as a classic, which we can probably all resonate with, to use your word, is if someone is asked to present, a lot of people literally feel an energetic disturbance around their solar plexus. Now, that's actually come about because if you were to track it back, they may not even realize it. They probably have a belief somewhere along the lines of, I'm not good enough to present, or if I present, I'm going to make a mistake, or I'm going to make myself look stupid. So there's that belief. The belief then results in the thoughts I've just mentioned, and those thoughts result in an emotion. Now, what I've just said happens in a split second when somebody's asked to present, but you've all experienced that feeling in your stomach, so you can see how a belief actually affects the body. So what Meta House does is it says, what is the belief that actually resulted to that feeling that results to an adaptation in different parts of the body? So for breast cancer, at some level, about 18 months before my diagnosis, I would have been having thoughts due to a belief around fear of abandonment and separation. An event would have happened. I would have perceived it from the position of having an unsupported belief around abandonment and separation. Literally, the body would have responded to that shock by adapting, because the body basically tries to protect the whole. It says, okay, Sharon has just had a massive energetic disturbance of her energetic body. We need to protect her, but we've also got to send her a message that there is something she needs to learn and grow from, because I believe very much, and I think you do, Carol, we're all down here. It's a bit like a playground where we're all meant to learn things, okay? So kind of illness really is kind of giving you a bit of a signpost that there's something there for you to learn. Somewhere along the line, I've either picked it up in this lifetime, or let's say maybe even ancestrally, and I've brought it with me, that I have a fear around abandonment and separation. So it gives me an opportunity to resolve that, and in doing so grow as a person. And certainly if you're like me and you've had cancer, one of the biggest fears you have is that it's going to come back. So if you can start to resolve that belief, you will change the thought, and you will therefore change the emotion, and therefore you're less likely to get the adaptation of the breast cancer coming back. And it fits perfectly with your higher energetic resonance, which is basically that we are energetic beings, and all illnesses is you've had a disturbance which is not supportive of your energetic body.
So how can we then learn to manage our emotions then, so that if we're starting to understand that there's this correlation, and also because most of us are brought up with the belief that it's a genetic thing.
Okay.
We have it. Well, I know.
Well, you and I have talked about this, because we're both in the Bruce Lipton fan club with regard to epigenetics. It's interesting actually, because there was an article in the Daily Mail yesterday, and I nearly cut it out for today, because they were again talking about they're bringing out a marker for breast cancer based on genes. And as you and I both know from Bruce Lipton's work and others regarding epigenetics, we've probably got it the wrong way round. And I talked to you about this before. If you and I were aliens and we were floating around planet Earth, and we just happened to look down on planet Earth, and we suddenly saw, every time there was a fire in a building, we saw these red fire engines, these things called red fire engines. We would probably think the red fire engines cause fires, and that's the analogy with regard to genes cause illness. What I believe, and I know Bruce Lipton does, and people looking into I can't say the word, but you know what I mean, epigenetics, and also linking to quantum mechanics, is that what you think changes something. Is you only express a specific DNA if you are having certain thoughts. And those thoughts are usually within a family. So because you model your mother or your father. So let's imagine you're a little baby and you've been brought up into a family of people there where there's breast cancer. One, you're going to keep getting the message, everybody in my family gets breast cancer. So you're starting to already get a belief you're going to get breast cancer. Okay, but even if you weren't aware, like me, I discovered, funnily enough, after my breast cancer diagnosis, that my grandmother died of breast cancer, and I didn't know. And actually, my dad had never bothered to look at her death certificate. There's a belief also in NLP and meta health and epigenetics that that ancestrally we bring through the energy of beliefs, because beliefs are effectively like an energetic signature. So if you bring through your DNA, let's say, an energetic signature of a belief of abandonment, as an example, then if you don't release it, it's going to express with your in your DNA. So actually, which is the chicken and egg? It's a bit like the chicken and egg. Which actually comes first? And increasingly, and I think health will catch up with what epigenetics and quantum mechanics is saying, is that ultimately we can. I think even Meta Health says there's maybe 2% of illnesses that are so genetic that possibly it's not based on what I've just said, although maybe down the line we'll find that's not even the case. Increasingly now, the data's showing that how you think and your beliefs and how you're brought up, so in what environment you're brought up, influences your DNA, which actually is really exciting because it means we can take responsibility. So rather than someone saying, well, I'm tough luck, Sharon, your mother's your family's got breast cancer, or you've got your family's got a history of mental illness, and so you've got to accept that it's going to happen. Actually, no, you don't have to accept it. You can make the choice to have different beliefs, which will result in different thoughts, which will result in different emotions. So you don't lead to the DNA expressing those illnesses, but also your body won't adapt to result in those illnesses. And obviously, the other part to this is making sure that your body is healthy, because the other thing that brings stress into your body, which is why the adaptation is more likely to happen, is I know from my point of view, and again, it's a bit of a chicken and egg, because of my beliefs, which I picked up from having my own mental health consultation. I used to have this incredible need to keep everybody really happy, and I felt totally responsible for everybody. So I never looked after myself. I used to get very stressed, and to self-medicate, I used to drink quite a lot. And so I was putting stress on my body as well by drinking. Now, it's interesting, they say that women who drink get breast cancer. I'm actually now beginning to think it's just that because you have certain characteristics in terms of your thoughts and behaviors, you tend to drink more, and then and it's linked to the breast cancer as opposed to it causes the breast cancer. Do you see what I'm saying? So it's so I know you're very much into healthy eating and yoga. They're really important, because what you're doing is you're helping to keep your body healthy. So you're reducing the risk of this adaptation. But ultimately, if you don't also deal with the beliefs, you can have the healthiest lifestyle in the world, but you are likely to get illnesses. And this is why you get some people who just lead what we would call wild lifestyles of drinking, smoking, doing everything you shouldn't, and live to a really old age. It's because actually they've probably got very healthy, in inverted commas, belief systems. See, to me that makes sense. You see, that explains so much.
It does, and it's clear now as well. And also what I'm noticing, there's like a rise in things like, in particular amongst women, fibromyalgia. What are your findings from a point of view of a mental health practitioner, where that comes from?
Okay, well, that's an interesting one, you see, because the other thing with Western medicine, they love to label something. They have to give it a label. So ultimately, fibromyalgia is a cluster of symptoms. So in Meta Health, we don't give an illness a name. We talk about the symptoms. So yes, it is breast cancer, but for me it would be a tumor in the milk ducts, okay? But fibromyalgia is a cluster of illnesses. So you're talking usually feeling very tired, achy joints, headaches. I'm just thinking they're the main ones, aren't they? Achy joints, fatigue, really. And in Meta Health, we would split those symptoms out. And so, for example, if you suffer from any sort of joint issue, in Meta Health, that relates to not feeling that you're good enough. Okay. Now, if you think about how it's interesting, fibromyalgia on the whole is much more of a women's illness than a man's illness. And if you think about culturally, there's a cultural belief, and also ancestrally, there's an energy that's come through for women, is that we're not as good as men, that we're not as equal as men. And also that's modeled by our mothers, so we see it in our mothers. I can remember my mum always saying, I don't think I'm good enough to get a job, dad's this, dad's that. So I think we very much feel that we're not good enough. So the women that generally get fibromyalgia they don't think they're good enough, and they don't believe they can be who they really are. So that leads to manifestations of certain symptoms, again related to the theme of their beliefs. But we're talking with fibromyalgia, actually a cluster of beliefs. It's just Western medicine has given it one definition. It's actually a cluster of different things resulting in different beliefs. And unfortunately, what happens is women who get fibromyalgia end up with a chronic illness where they keep cycling in and out of all the different symptoms, because the one symptom, without them realizing it, will make them, so if they, for instance, get fibromyalgia so they can't then work, that makes them feel that they're even less good enough. So it triggers it even more. Do you see what I'm saying? So what a Meta Health practitioner would do is basically unpick each of the symptoms, look at the underlying belief, and gradually change that belief using a number of different techniques, so that ultimately each symptom would end up resolving and going into health.
What is the actual technique that you use to treatment?
Well, one of the techniques I use is EFT, which is I don't know if you've heard of it, emotional freedom technique. That is actually recognised by the NHS, which is great. Wow. And again, it links to energetic resonance, because basically it works on it. A lot of people call it the acupuncture without needles, because the Chinese have always known that we have these energetic meridians running through the body, and if there is an issue, then they get blocked. And what EFT does is by tapping on certain points, you release the blocked energy. And by blocking the energy, it almost does a reverse. And it actually means that it's interesting, actually, when you do the EFT on somebody, what you're effectively doing is you're unblocking the energy, but it has a reverse effect. So it actually starts to change the belief as well. Because belief to energy, energy back to belief, there's a two-way process. So what you do is you release the blocked energy, and then also as you continue to tap, you literally tap in a new supportive belief. So that's one technique. I also sometimes use NLP, neuro-linguistic programming, and I also use something sometimes called timeline therapy as well. So there's a number of different techniques I use. But you know what? I think one of the biggest things is, as you and I were talking about just before this session, if somebody realizes there's a problem, then you're halfway there. And I think when you do a consultation using Meta Health, when somebody, which included myself, when you start to realize what it is that has been going on in your unconscious mind, sometimes you've not even been that aware of it. Once you can become aware of it, you can start to deal with it. I kind of was aware of some of the things that I did, behaviors, because beliefs, obviously you've got a belief leads to thoughts, it leads to emotions, but it also leads to a behavior, doesn't it? You've got two things going on. I was aware of some of my behaviors, but I never really understood why. Why do I have this major need to make sure that everybody else is okay, and make sure, you know, like I would just bend over backwards to make sure that everyone else, for instance, in my family was fine, at the expense of my own health. It wasn't until I went to see this mental health practitioner is what I realized was what was driving this behavior was the belief right back here was actually, I realized I had a fear of being abandoned, which actually, by my mother, which actually is ridiculous really when you think about it, but that is actually what my belief was. And actually I have actually had deep memory processing, where I was taken back into a previous life recently, and it kind of made sense when I kind of had a memory of something that happened to me in a previous life, where I'd basically not been a particularly nice person, and I'd been in America, and I'd been an Indian, and the tribe basically left me, deserted me, and basically said, you know, we don't want anything to do with you, and left me in the desert. And I probably died because I can remember feeling the fear. So if I brought that through with me, it's no wonder that I have a fear of being separated from my family, because the family represents, doesn't it, symbolically your tribe. So that kind of makes sense why that was driving my behavior. So I kind of it makes so much sense. And I didn't also think I was good enough, which is so those two things together is in the corporate world, I never pushed myself forward for promotions and things like that, because I just didn't feel that I deserved to go for those promotions. So I've realized in lots of different ways, and it's impacted on my relationships as well. I had quite a number of codependent relationships. So because I didn't think, I was too scared to be on my own, because obviously being on your own is being abandoned, isn't it? So what's amazing about doing this is it leads to personal growth in all areas of your life, and also it obviously helps to then raise your vibration, because obviously I had quite a lot of things that were kind of keeping me at a lower vibrational state. And it's only really through working through a lot of this over the last few years that gradually that veil of those unsupported beliefs has begun to lift. And now from where I am now, I've realized that my purpose is to help other women to know who they are, and then to decide what life they want. It might be that they do want to go back into the corporate world or the business world or whatever they were in before, or they may want to do something completely different, but they'll be doing it from a much better place, a much better place of power and authenticity and a higher resonance.
And then talking about things like sense of abandonment or not feeling worthy. As a woman in this society right now, it's very difficult to not feel that, even if you come from a really secure home environment or relationship, because then when you go out into the world, you've got every book or magazine that you read, you've got media, social media, shoving an ideal on you.
Which is a form of energy, which is, if you think about it, is a form of energy that you're being constantly bombarded with. Because as you know, we're all part of the whole of the same. So we're all part of within a matrix. So if you may be standing alone in a very strong position, but if the rest of the matrix energetically is giving a different energetic message, in effect lowering your vibration, that's why it's been quite tough. But I think things are changing. I think more and more women are, as you say, are awakening to what's happening, and the more of us that begin to realize that and energetically change, it will impact on the whole female population. Because there's lots of studies that have shown us, I don't know about about the theory of there's the monkeys. There was a monkey on an island somewhere in Caribbean or Africa, and they were well known for picking up this particular fruit on the beach and eating it, but obviously it had loads of grit and sand because it was covered in the sand of the beach. And one female monkey decided to pick the fruit up and wash it in some water, which of course made it much more tasty, I'm sure. And so all the other monkeys on that particular island followed suit. But the fascinating thing, and this is known, this is documented, it spread the behavior across all the other islands. Now, the islands were all separated by miles of sea. So how did that happen? It was because there was a change of consciousness, change of energy. So I think what you're doing now is really good, because as you're doing this, you're changing consciousness for women. So even if you are a strong woman and can stand alone, it will mean you won't then go out into society, and the consciousness, in inverted commas, out there will be having a supportive effect rather than what I think is probably to some degree happened to all of us at the moment, which is it doesn't support us to try and be authentic, to be who we really are, and to be in our power, really.
And just another thing that crossed my mind as well was there are cultural illnesses as well, especially coming from a West Indian background.
Sickle cell anemia, is it? Yeah.
Sickle cell and lupus and things like that just seem to completely continue.
I mean, I don't know that much about those, but I know that blood is to do with your identity. So I don't know whether it's people not feeling that they can be who they are.
Right.
I mean, I'm sure there'll be an expert in mental health with regard to that, but the blood is a very deep-seated something to do with the identity, as far as I can remember. So maybe it's to do with Caribbean people black people feeling they can't be who they are. If you think about identity, it's wrong to be me, and so the body is adapting to that stress, because I can't really be me. Society doesn't accept me. Okay, and even if you don't believe that, ancestrally it's coming through. Does that kind of make sense? Yeah. I mean, I've never been asked that question before, but to me I think, I'm sure the blood, I have to have a look at it, but I think it's to do with identity, and to me that would make a lot of sense.
I mean, logically, just off the bat, it makes sense.
Yeah.
It's one of those things. And I know we've spoke about this before as well, and things like mental illness and mental disturbances as well. How does that play into mental health?
Okay, mental illness is slightly more complicated because in mental health we have something called the concept of constellations, which is that, so for instance with breast cancer, because one of the things that Dr. Hamer did was he did CT scans of people's brains. So for each illness, he basically did CT scans, and what he noticed was that there was like what he called a little impact point on a specific part of the brain for each illness. That's why, because I've got a science, I'm kind of an unusual mix, because I've got a science background, but I'm very into all the alternatives, because to me the alternative isn't really alternative, it's just us catching up with what we've always known, if that makes sense. And it's the little concentric impact point is basically what happens when the shock happens, when the event happens, where you're kind of tipped over the edge and the stress happens and the body then kicks into its adaptation. So in Europe, if you went to see a mental health practitioner, they actually could do a CT scan of your brain, and they could tell you what illnesses you'd had without them even seeing you. Now with mental illness, it's an impact regarding a theme on both sides of the brain. So breast cancer was an impact point, and a conflict shock, we call it, with regard to something top line to do with abandonment and separation. But mental illness would be a conflict shock that hits the left hemisphere of the brain, and at the same time a conflict shock that hits the right side, the right hemisphere of the brain. So you've got two conflicts going on at the same time. So call it a constellation. So it could be on the left a conflict shock around very much around basic survival. Oh my God, my husband's died, and how am I going to survive, because he's the breadwinner. Okay, and then you could have on the right hand side, I've had my boundary, someone stepped over my boundary. So for example, somebody's stolen all my money. Okay, so if you've got both those two going on at the same time, basically so this will be resulting from a kind of belief that the person is holding, or a collection of beliefs the person's holding. So they've got thoughts going as a result of those beliefs, and that's leading to emotion. So imagine they've got two events that have happened at the same time, okay, which just unfortunately happen to impact on both sides of the brain. Okay, so what then happens, the body adapts, but in this case what actually happens, the adaptation is well, we call it mental illness, but it's a major behavioral change. So almost, so, you know, for instance, you've got bipolar with the person going into a manic phase and then going into massive depression, or schizophrenia where almost it's the person's disengaged almost from reality and is almost sort of seeing things or thinking they are someone else and hearing voices. So that is the body, that's the body actually trying to, is the body adapting to try and deal with these two conflicts that are going on at the same time. So I don't think there are a couple of mental health practitioners, I think, who deal with mental illness, but obviously it's quite a difficult area to deal with, because you're trying to help someone with mental illness and you've got to be very careful, obviously they don't have a relapse. So ideally what you would do is you'd sit down with these people and you would look to work on those beliefs to release them, so that the person will come back into health again. So it's just, the only difference is rather than it being, so with me, it was an impact point on one side of the brain. I think it's the left side of the brain. With mental illness, you're getting, and not actually, it's not just mental illness. Well, anything that's considered out of the norm is considered a mental illness. Constellations are used to explain aggression, even PTSD, people with eating disorders, all of that. They're all behaviors and they're adjustments by the body to conflict shocks that are going on both sides of the brain.
So even like a anorexia or bulimia?
Yes, yeah. There's a woman on when I was on the Meta Health course. There was unfortunately at the moment on the Meta Health website, the UK practitioners are down. There's no list at the moment because they're updating it. But when that goes live again, the Meta Health practitioners are, I think they are indicated by their specialities, and there is definitely at least one, if not two, Meta Health practitioners that specialise in eating disorders for children, and deal with these two constellations, these two conflicts that are going on both sides at the same time.
It's amazing.
It is amazing, isn't it?
Yeah, no, I think that just like fascinates me. And so it's just how can we start to manage our emotions? How can we start to, how do you know when you've got something that's running without then going,
Okay.
I continue to think this and I'm going to end up with breast cancer, or you know, my family thinks this way? Or
I think the first thing to do is, and none of us are taught to do this, is we're kind of taught that if you start to feel an uncomfortable emotion, which is let's be honest, like a sensation in the body, isn't it? But all that is your energy moving around your body. So we're all taught actually to put that almost to ignore it. It's kind of like, okay, don't even go there. So what shall I do? Well, instead we'll watch TV, or we'll drink, or I'll eat too much, or I'll gamble. All addictions almost quite often, a lot of the time, are people just kind of, I can't deal with that, so I'll do something else to take me away from that feeling. Okay, so one of the things that is really good to do to start with, and it's quite illuminating actually, is to take maybe one day. And it's actually quite difficult to do it for a whole day, which will make you realize you're probably quite good at it, Carol, because you do yoga, so you're probably much more aware of your body. But just for the whole day, just start to be aware of any sensations in your body, particularly with regard to any particular event. So let's say somebody says something to you that you don't particularly like. See how you feel. Has that made you feel angry? Has that made you feel insecure? Okay, and then what is recommended is actually that you sit down and you sit with that feeling, which none of us actually do. And actually what you're supposed to do, because again, it's just a message, the energy is what you're meant to do is allow it to come through the body and out. So one of the things that you can do is just to sit down. Obviously, center yourself, put your feet on the ground, do some slow breathing, feel the sensation, and try to kind of have the intention of almost taking that feeling, almost give it some, has it got a color? Has it got a heat? Has it got a shape? And to actually try and feel as you breathe that you're almost moving it through the body and out through your hands or your feet. And by doing that, you'll start to actually release the emotion. And if you remember what I said, is if you release the emotion, it kind of has a reverse, and it actually starts to change the belief. It certainly will make you much more aware, because if you've got an emotion, so you've got this sensation going on, most people it tends to be in the solar plexus, doesn't it? But sometimes I've had sensations in my throat. I don't know whether you've ever had a very upsetting situation and you've suddenly become aware that your throat's gone kind of well, obviously something's going on there, isn't it? So, you know, sit in it and then try and help it to release, and then just be aware of anything that comes into your head, because what you may start to find is, what are the repetitive thoughts that I'm having while I'm having this feeling? I do that much more now. And then ask yourself, somebody did something to me, was it yesterday or the day before, and I remember feeling a little bit insecure afterwards, and I thought, okay, so I just thought, okay, so I could feel it a little bit in my solar plexus, and then I tried to help to kind of release it, and then I was aware that there was a little voice going on in my head, which was probably still a little bit, because I'm still working on my I'm not good enough. So I could tell it was relating to that, I'm not good enough, so they don't like me, that's why they've made that comment. And so I realized it was relating to that belief of I'm not good enough. So the thought was, they don't like me, that's why they've said what they've just said. So then I sat there and I said, okay, Sharon, I said to myself, this is a real example, I said to myself, do you know what, maybe there's another reason why they said what they said. Maybe it's because they've had a bad day. Maybe they've misunderstood what I've said. Maybe that's just the way they speak, and actually it's not a reflection on me. And what you're doing, you're starting to change your thought processes and your beliefs. So in effect, you'll start to change the emotion anyway, but also you're helping to release the stuck emotion that's resulted because at the moment you've still got that belief. Does that make sense? So that's one of the biggest things to do, is to literally spend a day and say, right, my intention today is I'm going to start to be aware of any feelings that I'm getting in my body when I have any form of interactions with people, or I watch some kind of event. And then be aware of any little thoughts that go on in your head, because those thoughts will be linked to a belief. So that's a way you can start to work on yourself without having a coach, because you know, there's lots of different things you could do, and obviously we probably haven't got time. You can do a bit of EFT tapping, you know, as you're, some people find that distracting, but some people, they might sit on their chair and as they're releasing the emotion, they just tap on what we call the karate chop, which is the sort of the thick fatty area just below the little finger, you know, where you would do a karate chop. Just tap there. That's part of EFT. And if you do that, in a way, it's like it helps to shake the energy, the blocked energy out of your body. But if you can start to be aware of the thoughts and therefore the beliefs that resulted in that energy, yes, this will help to do the first aid, you know, the energy that's blocked at the moment. But then you can start to be aware of all the little beliefs that you've been holding that are not supportive, because no belief is wrong or right, it's just whether it supports you in leading a happy life and raising your energy. Does that make sense? So if you keep having a thought, I'm not good enough, so every time anyone says anything or you see anything from a point of I'm not good enough, if you keep reacting badly, that ultimately is going to reduce your energetic resonance, isn't it?
As always,
Hope that was helpful.
It's always helpful, you know. It's always
helpful. Well, there's a little tip that is a real, I would seriously,
that's a good one,
really important, because until I started training in neurolinguistic programming, I assumed, which was stupid now when I think about it, I assumed that everybody to some extent interpreted the world in exactly the same way as I did. And it wasn't until I started doing neurolinguistic programming and you have to do these little exercises, I realized that everybody sees things in a completely different way. And this is what it is if you've got a belief that supports you, then that's fine, you don't need to change it. But if you've got a belief that is not supporting you, it's those little beliefs, if you can just chip away at those, and your little message is the energy, the emotion. It's when, and then of course if you don't deal with that and it constantly builds up, that's then adapts, and that leads to illness. So the illness really is a big signpost, it's a big kick to say, look, come on Carol, come on Sharon, you really need to look at this, because this is not supporting you, you're not you're not going through the personal growth that you need to be going in this lifetime. Okay, so it's a really good thing to do. Just be aware of how you react to things, and that the way you're reacting is the energy.
With the illness being an indicator,
Yeah.
how can people start to understand that it's an indicator of something, and it's something that they have control of? Or is it,
well, you see, that's what meant, you see, I hope, I mean, one of the things, I know you're going to ask me what next for me. I mean, one of the things that and it's a bit scary for me, because I know that some of the things that I came down probably to learn in this lifetime is to be the real me, and to be authentic. So one of the things that I would like, I feel quite passionate about now, I would like to become an expert be seen as an expert in this whole concept of meta health for breast cancer. But the knock-on effect of that will be that it will have a knock-on effect for the concept of illness in general. And the more that people can start to see illness not as a bad thing, it's not actually a bad thing. But what actually happens is we go, without even realizing it, we go oscillating in and out of illness, classically what we call illness, all the time. But normally, because we don't have those particular beliefs that affect that particular illness, we sort of oscillate slightly in it for a short while, then we come out the other side. It's only when you keep getting a build up, because and you have one particular event that really triggers you, that you then go into the illness and you kind of stay there. Does that kind of make sense? So if people can start to see illness, that is all it's doing, is it's your body trying to tell you there's something you need to look at about what you believe, really, then that will make all the difference. And interestingly, even America, their national disease center have actually gone on their website, actually, which I thought was interesting. They've actually got something along the lines of, we now recognize that probably 85% of all illnesses have an emotional component. So so the fact that actually it's written there, it's just, we've got to, the thing is, that doesn't help you. So the thing is, what I like about meta health, it gives people a concept where they can kind of start to understand what it means by your illness has an emotional concept. I think I mentioned this to you a few days ago. If you go and see your doctor, they don't ever tell you why you've got breast cancer, or they might say it's your genes, okay? They will say you have breast cancer and we need to do X, Y, Z. What Meta Health does is it gives you the why. So what, I think we did this, and I talked to you about this before, really your doctor's a bit like the mechanic. Your car breaks down, you go in and he plays around with the bolts and just sort of puts the bolts back, but he doesn't ever find out what caused the bolt to fall off in the first place. Okay, so the Meta Health is taking it the one stage further, and I think we haven't got any choice really in this anyway, because ultimately the health systems around the world, like the UK, America, Europe, we cannot afford to just be spending the money that we are, because we're getting more and more chronic illnesses. People need to start to take responsibility, make the right choices, start looking at their own personal growth, and in doing so, will raise the energy of everybody. Consciousness will be raised, and we'll all be a lot healthier. So we can, I'm not saying the NHS and things like that are not a good thing. I tell you where I think they're brilliant is in the acute situation. If you and I were involved in a car accident and you or I broke an arm or a leg, we'd want it plastered, we'd want it sorted, etc. If you had a heart attack, you'd want someone to sort you out at that moment in time. This is about the long-term illnesses which are now becoming the big issues, like the diabetes, the cancers, the arthritises, etc. They are all resulting from your body adapting to an unsupported belief. And if we can all start to work on releasing those, we won't need to spend as much money on the NHS, and we can spend it on other things.
So what is the best advice a woman has ever given to you?
I keep getting told this. The best advice I've ever been given, actually I wrote it down for myself just to, because it's a really simple one, but it's actually really, really important for me.
Perfect. And which female do you think represents higher energetic resonance?
Well, for me, it's going to have to be Louise Hay, isn't it? I mean, I don't know. Do you know much about Louise Hay? I mean, she's actually, it's interesting about synchronicity, because when since I've had my breast cancer, I've read avidly, and I didn't even know about Louise Hay before my breast cancer. And it was really weird. When I was off sick, going through my radiotherapy, etc., or I should say doing sickness, because I was doing my sickness, I walked into the a local Oxfam shop, and the book, You Can Heal Yourself, from Louis, dropped out of actually virtually dropped off the mantelpiece at me, which is really weird. So I took it home and read it, and to me it was kind of, so this was even before the Meta Health course. This would have been about 2010, 2011. And I started reading this book, and it made so much sense. And her story actually is a good example of Meta Health, because she had a very difficult childhood. I don't know if you know, she was raped and she was abused by her by quite a lot of people within her close-knit family. And in the 70s, she developed cervical cancer. And she actually said, I realized that my cervical cancer was me not forgiving myself for the fact that it was my fault. So there we are, there's the belief. It's my fault that I was abused. And so she realized that her own beliefs and thought processes had probably resulted in her illness. And she then went on to obviously write the book You Can Heal Yourself, which is very much around the mind-body connection. And I think the other thing is, a lot of people probably don't know as well, she was one of the first people to get heavily involved in helping AIDS patients.
I saw one of the documentaries.
Yeah.
Was it Open Door that they called it?
I thought, and I think she called it Hayer's Voice or Hoy's Voice or something. So she was, yeah, maybe you're right. That might have been further down the line. And she kind of did a lot with women, with AIDS patients years before anybody else got involved. And through that, she then got picked up by obviously Oprah Winfrey, which of course she's another amazing lady. And I think what's amazing about Louise Hay is obviously she set up Hay Publishing and really encouraged a lot of people out there to kind of achieve their life purpose, I suppose, because through their life purpose they got published through support from her. So I think she is a lovely example of higher energetic resonance, really.
God rest her.
I know, she died in August, didn't she?
Yeah, just recently. And you talked about this before, but maybe you've got more to say on it, or you've got a different one. Your favorite ritual?
It probably is the walking along. That does. It's so important for me, but also actually, interestingly, because you were doing some mantras just before I came on, I actually do quite, when I'm feeling I want to feel abundant, I do one of the Sanskrit mantras, which is the Om Bhurvubhuva Savaha Tat Savitur mantra. And I was told to do it from a very deep kind of from the belly rather than from the chest, and to really say it very kind of firmly. And I'm very aware, actually, I quite often do it when I'm driving in the car. If I do that mantra as I'm driving, I can feel my throat chakra opening up, and I can also feel that my energy is increasing as I do it. So that is the other one I do. If I'm feeling I kind of want that extra kind of energetic boost, I will quite, if I'm going to do a, like if I'm going to go and see somebody where I'm kind of wanting to talk to them about my business, whatever, I will quite often, as I'm going along driving in the car, anyone watching me, they'll wonder what I'm doing. I will be chanting that mantra.
I remember that one.
Yeah, it's a good one.
Yeah, I did that one when I was out in India. We did that every day, actually.
Yeah, there's a friend of mine, actually. He runs a vitamin shop up in Dorking, and I'm not sure, is it which religion it is that it comes from. They still do it now, because I happened to mention it to him, and he said to me, "How do you know that?" He said because he said literally, he took me to the back of his shop, and he had a little altar where he did his little ritual, and he said, I say that mantra every morning before I start my work.
Love a mantra.
Yeah, love a mantra. Maybe it's quite a good little strapline, that, isn't it? Love a mantra.
Oh, I love a mantra. So what's next on the cards for you?
Well, this is I'm kind of early days for me, as you know, Carol. So I'm getting quite exciting, because it's kind of, I've done this and I'm doing a few interviews. So I kind of want to I obviously want to get the message out there, because I do feel quite passionate about this whole beliefs, thoughts, emotions lead to illness if you don't kind of look at it and kind of release it, etc. I would like to be seen. I would like to get more involved in maybe as becoming a kind of a leader, an expert from a mental health point of view on this, because I don't feel that at the moment mental health is out there as much as it should be. I think I'm going to put I'd love to get myself on something like This Morning or Loose Women or something, just to kind of get it out there, getting people thinking a little bit about it, seeing things in a different way. Because some people, you and I are kind of bought into it, but some people it probably is quite out there. But the more people hear it, start to get drip fed about it, the more it will become more kind of, yeah, maybe that makes sense. So and that's kind of what I'd like to do.
So I'm just saying those two areas are the perfect platform where you've got everyday women who are
absolutely
who really need to hear it. And sometimes you feel we're maybe preaching to the choir a little bit, but also we just need to know this because maybe someone listening to this podcast or watching the podcast then play it to somebody who might not want to hear it from their lips. Sometimes you've got all the information for your family. They don't want to hear it from you, but they'll hear it from a TV program or something like that.
Ultimately, if someone doesn't want to accept it, and it's not, if it really because also obviously beliefs are really important. I mean, even the pharmaceutical industries know that, because all trials are done with a placebo. Because we know that if you give somebody a tablet and say, even if it's got absolutely nothing in it, like a Smartie, and say, this is a fantastic, I mean, they've actually proven that the outcome of a patient is more to do with the way the doctor approaches the patient and the way they give the medication than anything else. So if you have a doctor that says, even with a placebo, this drug is fantastic and it is just going to turn your life around, it's going to make that illness just disappear, patients will actually get well because it's belief. Their belief has changed. Conversely, if a doctor sort of walks in and says, this is why it's so unfortunate when they do say to patients, you've got terminal cancer, because actually you're giving that belief to somebody, and you're speeding up the process even quicker. If unfortunately their illness has gone that much further down the line, you're not helping the situation. So some people won't want to believe this, and that's fine, and that's their world. But ultimately, if I could even change, imagine if I could just change even 10% or 20% of the female population's thoughts about this. Imagine the effect that would have, because there are so many women. I mean, for example, breast cancer. There's figures I can't remember, but they're scary about the number of women that are diagnosed with breast cancer every single day. Even if I could get 20% of them to realize that there is something they can do to make a difference, it would be quite nice, really.
And it'd be great to feel that they're in power of it, as opposed to it's something that's inevitable, and then not have to do any kind of barbaric treatment in order to feel that they're not going to get it. So I'm with you on that. I'm all for just raising the energy, and feeling, and for any woman to feel that they're in control somehow. And it's as simple, and that doesn't necessarily mean that it's easy.
No,
as simple as that, you've got the tools already there. It's just that sometimes the tools that are there that will help you are kind of switched against you, like you said, kind of reversing belief in itself as well. So the way that you've got those negative thoughts is like, work on it and kind of trigger it and get yourself out of it. I know for myself.
And what I would say is, if somebody came to me, and I do say this, and I'm not just saying this because it from a insurance point of view, is if someone comes to me and they are going through, let's say, a mastectomy, if they believe that actually that's also going to help them, I would never say not to do that. I'd say okay, that's fine, but what we can do is we can look at these beliefs and look to change them so that it doesn't come back. Do you see the difference? So it's kind of, so it's and Meta Health, if you look on the website, we very much say we try and work with them with medical professionals, because belief is very strong. So if someone believes that having the mastectomy is going to help them, then that's fine. This is just about helping them in terms of this. By you doing this, one, this will help your personal growth, but also it's going to increase the chances of it coming back, reducing that considerably, because you're no longer going to be triggered. Do you see what I mean? Because even if they have a mastectomy, there's nothing to say it won't come back. So okay, they can't come back in their ducts because they won't be there, but it's important that they change those belief systems. So I do certainly say to people, look, if you want to go and see your doctor, and well, I say do go and continue seeing your doctor, but this is working, because at the moment we're so early. Do you see what I mean in terms of people's belief systems? To suddenly, I've got to be realistic at the moment. Maybe that's a belief I have, which I need to change, but to suddenly change it drastically is probably being a bit unrealistic at the moment. And that's just me being realistic.
And where can we find you? Where can we find
Okay, well, obviously you can find me on my website, which is very easy. And I have to say, Carol, you did it. And I have to say, and I'm not just saying this, it was absolutely amazing, because I've had 2 websites done before, and this one just is me. Wow. So that's why you're so good. It's www.sharoncurry.co.uk, and if they go on there, they can see a little bit more about Meta Health, what the program is that I do, and if they want to contact me and have a chat with me on a one-to-one and just have a bit of a chat, there's no obligation. If they want to take it further, that's fine. And then I'm going to be doing a newsletter, because I am just about to start that, actually, because it's Breast Cancer Month this month.
Of course. Fantastic. Well, I just want to say, Sharon, thank you so much for coming on to Her Conversations, and
thank you, Carol,
being part of the conversation and the mission to just awaken women, or help them in awakening.
Okay, well, thank you very much.
No problem. Thank you.
Thanks.
And wasn't that a fascinating conversation with Sharon? I always learn so much when I speak to her. And cancer is a very sensitive subject for so many people. And one thing I'd like to say is, maybe you know someone in your circle, in your life, who is embarking on a journey through breast cancer, and perhaps you can give or share this episode with them, and maybe they might find working with somebody who's been through breast cancer, who can guide them through the journey and make it a little bit easier for them. And thank you for staying with me through another episode, and just want to say, please feel free to subscribe so that you can get each new episode directly onto your device as it goes up. I put one out every week. And every week I'm getting to talk to some fascinating women, so I hope you're enjoying it as much as I am enjoying making it. And if you want to find out a little bit more about me, you can find me on my website, which is carolmaywhittick.com. That's carolmaewhittick.com. Or you can find me on Facebook under that name, or Twitter and Instagram at Kazmick, that's CAZMICK. So until the next episode of Her Conversations, have a great week.